The night Grant Mercer planned to destroy his marriage in front of Manhattan's elite, his wife walked into the ballroom wearing black satin and another man's ring. She didn't come to beg. She came to bury him. While Grant stood at the podium rehearsing his public divorce announcement, Selene stepped onto that same stage and revealed she'd already erased him from her life months ago, divorced, remarried, and reborn as someone he never knew existed. The room exploded. Grant's world shattered. And somewhere in the wreckage, a dangerous truth emerged. He'd spent years sleeping beside a stranger. If you want to see how far revenge can take a woman who's been invisible too long, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first mistake Grant Mercer made wasn't the affair. It was thinking nobody would notice. The second mistake was believing his wife wouldn't care. Grant stood in the marble bathroom of his penthouse, straightening his bow tie with hands that should have been shaking but weren't. Beyond the closed door, Vanessa Laurent waited in his bed, her perfume still clinging to the sheets like evidence he'd stopped bothering to hide. She'd asked him earlier, voice honey smooth and just drunk enough to sound brave, when he planned to tell his wife. "Tonight," he'd said, kissing her collarbone, "at the gala. Everyone will know by midnight." Vanessa had laughed, delighted and vicious. "You're actually going to do it publicly? Why hide?" Grant had pulled back, meeting her eyes in the dim light. "Selene's been a ghost in our marriage for years. She'll probably thank me." Now, alone with his reflection, Grant studied the man staring back. 43. Sharp jaw. Steel gray eyes that women called intense and men called calculating. A body maintained by personal trainers and discipline. Success carved into every line of his face. He looked like a man who won. He looked like a man who deserved better than a wife who spent her days buried in library archives and charity work. Nobody important attended. Better than a woman who wore the same modest dresses to every function, who smiled politely at his colleagues' jokes, who never complained when he canceled dinner plans or came home smelling like someone else's perfume. Selene Vale, no, Selene Mercer, though she'd never really felt like his, had been the perfect accessory when he'd needed one. Elegant, educated, quiet. The kind of woman who made powerful men feel stable, grounded, respectable. But Grant had outgrown respectable. He wanted fire, ambition. A woman who matched his hunger instead of watching it from the sidelines with those sad, knowing eyes. Vanessa gave him that. Vanessa laughed at the right moments and fucked like she had something to prove and looked phenomenal in photographs. She made him feel young again, dangerous again, like the world still held mysteries worth chasing. Tonight, at the Blackwell Legacy Gala, the annual circus where Manhattan's wealthiest gathered to pretend their money made them decent, Grant would make it official. He'd rehearsed the speech a dozen times, gracious but firm, respectful but final. He'd paint himself as a man brave enough to pursue happiness instead of hiding behind a hollow marriage. The narrative mattered. The narrative always mattered. His phone buzzed against the marble counter. A text from Vanessa, still naked in his bed. "Don't chicken out." Grant smiled, pocketed the phone, and walked out to face a night that would rewrite his entire life. Just not the way he planned. The Blackwell Legacy Gala transformed the Imperial Crescent Hotel into something between a palace and a predator's hunting ground. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across a ballroom built for 800 guests, who'd each paid $20,000 just to walk through the door. White roses climbed marble columns. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable. Champagne flowed like absolution. Grant arrived alone. Selene would come separately. She always did these days, claiming she had foundation meetings or library commitments. Grant suspected she just preferred avoiding him, and honestly, he didn't mind. Less pretense, less effort, less pretending their marriage was anything but paperwork. The crowd swallowed him immediately. Handshakes and backslaps and hollow compliments from men who'd stab him for a percentage point. Grant moved through it all with practiced charm, his mind half focused on the speech folded in his jacket pocket. "Grant Mercer, you beautiful bastard." Senator Richard Hartwell materialized beside him, already 2 drinks deep and grinning like a shark. "Tell me you brought that gorgeous wife of yours. Selene's the only reason these things stay civilized." Something cold flickered through Grant's chest. "She'll be here." "Good, good. Vanessa Laurent's here too, I noticed." Hartwell's grin sharpened. Saw her talking to the Vanderbilt crew near the bar. Stunning woman. Absolutely stunning. Grant forced a smile. She is. Surprised you two aren't? Hartwell stopped, eyes glittering with the kind of knowledge that came from too many closed-door conversations. Well, anyway, exciting night ahead, I hear. Lots of announcements. Something like that. Hartwell clapped his shoulder and vanished into the crowd, leaving Grant alone with the sudden nauseating realization that people already knew. Not specifics, maybe, but enough. Enough to gossip. Enough to watch tonight's drama unfold like entertainment. Good, Grant told himself. Let them watch. Let them see a man strong enough to choose his own happiness. But his hands felt cold. The string quartet shifted into something softer, more dramatic. Conversations dimmed, heads turned toward the ballroom entrance. Grant turned too, and saw his wife for the first time in weeks. Selene stood beneath the entrance archway like something carved from midnight and diamonds. A black satin gown clung to her body. Not the modest, elegant cut she usually wore, but something dangerous, backless, devastating. Her dark hair swept up to expose a neck Grant couldn't remember ever really looking at. Diamond earrings caught the light. Her face, always pretty in that understated way, looked sharp now, defined. Like someone had stripped away everything soft and left only edges. But none of that was what stopped Grant's breath. It was the man beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, mid-40s maybe, with silver threading through dark hair and a face that looked like it had been broken and rebuilt more than once. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that screamed money, not new money, not even old money, but the kind of wealth that didn't bother announcing itself because everyone already knew. He moved like violence wrapped in silk, and his hand rested on Selena's lower back with the easy possession of someone who belonged there. The ballroom went silent. Not completely. The quartet still played, glasses still clinked, but silent enough. Silent in the way rooms get when power walks through the door and everyone instinctively steps aside. Grant felt his throat tighten. Beside him, Senator Hartwell whispered, "Jesus Christ, is that Lucien Draov?" The name hit Grant like cold water. Lucien Draov. He'd heard it before, always in hushed tones, always with that particular mix of fear and fascination reserved for men who operated outside normal rules. Shipping magnate, private security empire, offshore investments nobody could quite trace, the kind of man who attended events like this because he owned half the people in the room, not because he needed their approval. And he was touching Grant's wife. Selene's eyes swept the ballroom with calm precision, landing on Grant for exactly 1 second before moving past him like he was furniture. Something inside Grant's chest cracked. They moved through the crowd together, Selene and this stranger, this dangerous stranger. And people parted. Not obviously, not dramatically. But they parted. Conversations paused. Eyes followed. The energy in the room shifted like everyone had suddenly remembered there were hierarchies beyond money, beyond power, beyond everything they thought mattered. Grant watched Selene smile at someone, not her usual polite smile, but something genuine, and felt his hands curl into fists. She looked happy. She looked free. She looked like a woman who'd shed an unwanted skin and emerged as something sharper. Vanessa appeared at Grant's elbow, champagne in hand and confusion creasing her perfect face. "Who is that with Selene?" "I don't know." Grant's voice came out rougher than intended. "Well, he's—" Vanessa paused, studying them. "He's very intense." Intense. Yes, that was one word for it. Terrifying was another. The evening program began. A local philanthropist took the stage, droning through statistics about education, initiatives, and poverty reduction. Grant barely heard it. His eyes stayed locked on Selene, sitting 3 tables away with Lucien Draov's arm draped casually across the back of her chair. She laughed at something Draov said. A real laugh. Unguarded and bright. Grant couldn't remember the last time he'd made her laugh like that. Couldn't remember if he ever had. Vanessa's hand slid into his under the table, squeezing once. "You okay?" "Fine." "You look like you're about to commit murder." Grant forced his jaw to unclench. "Just surprised to see her here?" "With him, you mean?" Vanessa's voice carried an edge now. Should I be worried? About what? About whatever's happening in your head right now. Grant turned to face her, beautiful, ambitious, uncomplicated Vanessa, and felt nothing. Not desire, not affection, just a hollow space where certainty used to live. I'm fine, he lied. Vanessa didn't look convinced, but she let it go. The philanthropist finally finished. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Then the event coordinator took the microphone, smiling too wide. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special announcement tonight. Please welcome to the stage Mrs. Selene Draov. The name detonated in Grant's skull. Draov. Mrs. Selene Draov. Around him, the room erupted in polite applause. Confused whispers, heads swiveling between Grant and the stage. Vanessa's hand went rigid in his. What the fuck? Grant couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only watch as Selene rose from her seat with the grace of someone who'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. She crossed to the stage. No hesitation, no nervousness. Lucien Draov watched her like a man watching his own masterpiece come to life. Selene took the microphone. The ballroom fell silent. She smiled, not at Grant, not at anyone specific, just a smile that said, I know something you don't, and began to speak. Thank you all for being here tonight. Her voice carried clearly, confidently, without the soft uncertainty Grant remembered. I know many of you are confused. Some of you are likely very confused. Nervous laughter scattered through the crowd. So let me clarify a few things. Selene's eyes found Grant across the room and held. 6 months ago, I finalized my divorce from Grant Mercer. The room exploded. Not literally, but the sound, gasps and whispers and shocked laughter, hit like a physical wave. Grant sat frozen, Vanessa's nails digging into his palm. Selene continued, unshaken. The proceedings were quiet, private, handled with discretion by excellent attorneys who understood that some endings don't require public spectacle. She paused, letting that sink in. 3 months ago, I married Lucien Draov. More gasps, more whispers, heads turning toward Draov, who sat perfectly still, expressionless, dangerous. And tonight, Selene said, her voice gaining strength, I'm honored to announce the Draov Foundation, a $100 million initiative dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships, rebuild their lives, and reclaim their power. The applause started slow, then built, then roared. Selene stood in the center of it all, bathed in spotlight and vindication, while Grant sat drowning in his own irrelevance. She didn't look at him again. Didn't need to. She'd already said everything that mattered. The rest of the gala passed in a blur of humiliation so complete Grant felt it in his bones. People avoided his table. Conversations died when he approached. Vanessa sat rigid beside him, fury and embarrassment radiating off her in waves. You didn't know, she hissed. Not a question, an accusation. No. 6 months, Grant. She divorced you 6 months ago and you didn't fucking know? Grant had no answer. No excuse. Just the crushing realization that he'd been so wrapped up in his affair, his plans, his goddamn speech, that he'd completely missed his wife dismantling their marriage. Vanessa stood abruptly, chair scraping. I need air. She left. Grant sat alone, surrounded by 800 people who now saw him exactly as he was, a man so blind he didn't notice his own life ending. Across the ballroom, Selene moved through the crowd with Lucien Draov at her side. Powerful people gravitated toward them. Senators, CEOs, old money and new money, and the kind of money that didn't need labels. They all wanted proximity to whatever Selene had become. And Grant sat at an empty table, holding a speech he'd never give, watching the woman he'd ignored transform into someone he'd never reach. Around 11, Lucien Draov excused himself from a conversation and walked directly toward Grant's table. Every instinct screamed at Grant to run. He stayed. Draov stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he looked even more dangerous. Not in an obvious way, but in the quiet confidence of someone who'd done violence and would do it again without losing sleep. Grant Mercer. His voice carried a faint accent Grant couldn't place. Eastern European, maybe. Smoothed by years abroad, but still there, underneath. That's me. Grant forced himself to meet Drakov's eyes. Dark. Unreadable. cold as river stones. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Grant stood, legs unsteady, and followed Draov toward the ballroom's private terrace. The October air hit sharp and clean. Manhattan glittered below them, indifferent and enormous. They stood at the railing, silent. Finally, Draov spoke. Selene asked me not to do this. Do what? Have this conversation. Draov pulled a silver cigarette case from his jacket, offered one to Grant. Grant shook his head. Draov lit his own, exhaled smoke into the night. She thinks you're harmless now, irrelevant. I disagree. I'm not, Grant started. You're a man who just lost control of his own narrative, Draov interrupted, voice soft and lethal. That makes you dangerous, not to me, to yourself, and by extension, to Selene. Grant's hands gripped the railing. I would never hurt her. You already did. Draov turned to face him fully. For years, slowly, with indifference. That's the worst kind of hurt because the victim keeps hoping it will stop. The words landed like punches. I didn't... Grant's voice cracked. I didn't realize. I know. That's the problem. Draov studied him with something between pity and contempt. You never saw her. Not really. You saw a role, a function, something decorative that made you look stable. Grant wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but every word was true. Selene chose me, Draov continued, because I saw her, all of her. The intelligence you ignored, the strength you dismissed, the hunger you never noticed because you were too busy feeding your own. He flicked ash over the railing. So here's what happens next. You leave her alone, completely. No contact, no attempts to apologize or make things right. You let her build her new life without your shadow hanging over it. And if I don't? Draov smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Then I'll remind you that I built my fortune in places where problems disappear permanently. I don't need to touch you, Grant. I just need to make a phone call. And every investment you have, every business deal, every social connection, it all evaporates. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering how you went from Manhattan elite to nobody so quickly. The threat hung in the cold air between them. Grant believed every word. Do we understand each other? Draov asked. Grant nodded. Good. Draov stubbed out his cigarette. Enjoy the rest of your evening. He walked back inside, leaving Grant alone on the terrace, with nothing but his own reflection in the glass and the terrible weight of understanding what he'd lost. Vanessa was gone when Grant returned to the ballroom. Her coat, her purse, her presents, all vanished. A text message waited on his phone. Don't call me. Don't follow me. I deserve better than being your second choice. Grant stared at the words until they blurred. Around him, the gala continued. Laughter, music, the sound of people who still had lives that made sense. He'd walked in tonight planning to destroy his marriage. Instead, he'd discovered it was already dead, and the woman he'd buried it with had become someone he didn't recognize, someone powerful and untouchable. And so far beyond his reach, she might as well be a stranger. Grant left through a side exit, avoiding goodbyes and questions and the pitying looks that would follow him for months. Outside, Manhattan stretched cold and indifferent beneath a sky choked with light pollution. For the first time in his adult life, Grant Mercer had no plan. No script, no control. Just the horrible, dawning realization that he'd spent years sleeping beside a woman whose name he knew, but whose heart remained a complete mystery. And now she belonged to someone else. Someone who'd seen what Grant had been too blind to notice. He stood on the sidewalk, wind cutting through his expensive suit, and felt the foundation of his entire world crack open beneath him. This was only the beginning. The real destruction, the kind that hollowed you out from the inside, hadn't even started yet. Patience. The first 3 days after the gala, Grant didn't leave his penthouse. He told himself it was strategic, a cooling-off period. Time to regroup and plan his next move with the kind of calculated precision that had built his career. But the truth sat heavier. He was hiding. The penthouse felt enormous and suffocating all at once. 1,400 square feet of marble and glass and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Everything carefully curated to project success. Everything hollow. Grant spent hours staring at his phone, scrolling through news articles that dissected his humiliation with gleeful precision. Manhattan power couple's secret divorce shocks elite circle. Selene Mercer, now Draov, announces $100 million foundation while ex-husband sits stunned. Who is Lucien Draov, the mysterious billionaire who stole Manhattan's most overlooked wife? That last headline made Grant throw his phone across the room hard enough to crack the screen. Overlooked. The word burrowed under his skin like a splinter. He poured himself whiskey at 11 in the morning and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. October had stripped most of the trees bare. Everything looked skeletal, exposed. His phone buzzed from where it had landed near the couch, still functional despite the shattered screen. 12 missed calls from his business partner, Marcus Webb. 8 texts from colleagues asking if he was okay. 3 voicemails from his mother, each progressively more concerned. Nothing from Vanessa. Nothing from Selene. Grant drained his glass and poured another. On the 4th day, Marcus showed up unannounced, using the spare key Grant had given him years ago for emergencies. Jesus Christ. Marcus stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. Empty bottles, closed curtains. Grant unshaven and wearing the same clothes he'd slept in. You look like shit. Thanks for the diagnosis. Grant didn't turn from the window. Marcus crossed the room, grabbing the whiskey bottle before Grant could refill his glass. We need to talk. About what? How my wife divorced me 6 months ago and I was too fucking blind to notice? How I planned this grand exit and she'd already left the building? Pick a topic, Marcus. They're all humiliating. The Vanderbilt deal fell through. That got Grant's attention. He turned. What? They pulled out this morning. No explanation. Just a very polite email saying they're exploring other options. Marcus set the bottle down on the coffee table. That's 3 deals in 4 days, Grant. Investors are spooked. Spooked by what? A divorce? Spooked by you. Marcus sat on the arm of the couch, arms crossed. You're radioactive right now. Everyone saw what happened at the gala. They're wondering what else you missed, what else you're not paying attention to. Grant felt his jaw tighten. My personal life has nothing to do with my business acumen. It has everything to do with perception, and right now you're perceived as a man who got blindsided by his own wife. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence. The words landed like a slap. Grant grabbed the bottle back, poured another drink. So what do? You get your shit together. Marcus stood, walked to the windows. You show up. You remind people why they wanted to work with you in the first place. You stop hiding in this tomb, and you fight back. Fight what? She won, Marcus, completely. Then make them stop caring. Marcus turned to face him. Throw yourself into work. Make some noise. Launch something big. Remind Manhattan that Grant Mercer doesn't stay down. It sounded reasonable, logical. It sounded like running from the real problem. But Grant nodded anyway. Okay. Marcus clapped his shoulder. Shower, shave. Meet me at the office in 2 hours. We'll start damage control. After Marcus left, Grant stood in the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing away 4 days of stagnation and self-pity. But he couldn't scrub away the image of Selene on that stage. Confident, powerful, free. Everything he'd never let her be when she was his. The office felt different. Grant noticed it immediately. The way conversation stopped when he walked past conference rooms. The careful neutrality in his assistant's voice. The weight of unasked questions hanging in the air. Marcus had prepared a strategy. Press releases emphasizing Grant's upcoming projects. Carefully worded statements about amicable separations and mutual respect. A packed schedule designed to project momentum. It all felt like putting lipstick on a corpse. Grant went through the motions anyway. Meetings, phone calls, handshakes with men who smiled too carefully and watched him too closely. By the 3rd day back, he'd almost convinced himself things were stabilizing. Then he saw the magazine. Manhattan Elite had Selene on the cover. Not a paparazzi shot, not a candid. A full photo shoot, professional, deliberate. She wore white, a stark contrast to the black gown from the gala, sitting in what looked like a library or study. Books surrounded her, soft light, intelligent eyes staring directly at the camera with the kind of quiet intensity that made you lean in closer. The headline read, Selene Draov, the woman you never knew, was always there. Grant bought 3 copies, hated himself for it, read the interview in his office with the door locked. The journalist had asked about the divorce. Selene's answer was surgical. Grant is a brilliant businessman, but brilliance in one area doesn't guarantee wisdom in others. We wanted different things. I wanted partnership. He wanted something easier to manage. No anger, no bitterness, just brutal, elegant honesty. Further down, they'd asked about Lucien. Lucien sees me. That's the simplest way to explain it. He doesn't see a role or a function or an accessory. He sees me, complicated, ambitious, flawed, and he wants all of it. That's rare. That's precious. That's worth everything. Grant read that paragraph 4 times. Each time felt like swallowing glass. The interview continued, discussing the foundation, Selene's background in social work that Grant had barely acknowledged, her plans for expansion, her vision for helping women rebuild their lives after trauma. Every answer revealed a person Grant had never bothered to know. He was still reading when his phone rang. Unknown number. Grant almost didn't answer. Something made him pick up. Mr. Mercer? A woman's voice. Professional. Careful. My name is Ivy Corbett. I'm an investigative journalist with the Metropolitan Review. I was hoping you might have a few minutes to talk. Grant's grip tightened on the phone. About what? Lucien Draov. The name hit like electricity. I don't know anything about Lucien Draov, Grant said carefully. I think you know more than you realize. Papers rustled on her end. I'm working on a story about his business empire. Some concerning connections, financial irregularities. I've been trying to get information for months, but people are hesitant to talk. Maybe they have nothing to say. Or maybe they're afraid. A pause. You're not afraid, though, are you, Mr. Mercer? You're angry. Grant felt his pulse quicken. I don't know what you're talking about. Your ex-wife married a man whose wealth comes from places most people won't look too closely at. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, business partners with very questionable backgrounds. Don't you want to know who she's really with? Part of Grant, the ugly, wounded part, wanted to say yes, wanted to unleash this journalist on Lucien like a weapon, but Drakov's words echoed in his head. I just need to make a phone call. I can't help you, Grant said. Can't or won't. Both. If you change your mind. Grant hung up, sat in silence, staring at Selene's face on the magazine cover. Don't you want to know who she's really with? The question burrowed deep. Grant lasted 2 more weeks before the obsession fully took hold. It started innocently enough. Google searches, public records, articles about Drakov's business empire. Lucien Draov owned a shipping company based in Rotterdam, security firms operating across Eastern Europe, real estate in 6 countries, investments in tech startups, pharmaceutical companies, rare earth mining operations. On paper, everything looked legitimate, but the gaps were what haunted Grant. Periods where Draov disappeared from public record entirely. Business partners who died in accidents or retired abruptly. Competitors who folded without explanation. A pattern of power that felt less like success and more like conquest. Grant hired a private investigator, then fired him 3 days later when the man returned looking pale and shaken. I can't help you with this, the investigator had said, sliding Grant's retainer check back across the desk. Whatever you think you're looking for, it's not worth it. What did you find? Nothing. That's the problem. The investigator stood, already moving toward the door. When you look into someone and find nothing, no criminal record, no lawsuits, no enemies willing to talk, it means one of 2 things. Either they're a saint, or they're so dangerous that everyone's too scared to leave evidence. Lucien Draov isn't a saint. After he left, Grant sat alone in his office and made a decision that would change everything. He called Ivy Corbett back. They met in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's watchful eyes. Ivy was younger than Grant expected, early 30s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back in a functional ponytail. She had the look of someone who'd learned to sleep with one eye open. You called, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. No preamble, no small talk. I'm listening, Grant said. That's all. I'm not confirming anything. Not going on record. Fair enough. Ivy pulled out a tablet, opened a file. Here's what I know so far. For the next hour, she walked Grant through a labyrinth of shell corporations, numbered accounts, and business dealings that traced back through Cyprus, the Cayman Islands, and several former Soviet republics. Lucien Draikov's empire, she explained, was built on legitimate business fronts that masked something darker underneath. Money laundering, possibly. Arms dealing, maybe. Connections to organized crime networks that operated in shadows deep enough that law enforcement couldn't, or wouldn't, shine light on them. But you can't prove any of this, Grant said. Not yet. Ivy's jaw set. That's why I need sources. People willing to talk. People who've been inside his world. Like Selene. Like Selene. Ivy leaned forward. Does she know? About what he really is? Grant thought about the woman on that magazine cover. Intelligent. Deliberate. Someone who'd planned her exit from his life with surgical precision. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know her well enough to say. Ivy studied him with something that looked almost like pity. That's sad. Yeah. Grant exhaled slowly. What do you need from me? Access. Information. Anything you remember about their relationship. When they met. How they met. Whether she mentioned him before the divorce. Grant searched his memory, came up empty. He'd been so wrapped up in Vanessa, in his plans, in his own reflection, that Celine's life had become white noise. I don't have anything, he said finally. Then get something. Ivy closed her tablet. You have history with her. Use it. Ask questions. Get close again. She won't talk to me. Make her. Ivy stood, sliding a business card across the table. Call me when you have something worth sharing. She left. Grant sat alone with his cold coffee and the terrible knowledge of what he'd just agreed to. The opportunity came 2 weeks later at a charity auction Selene was hosting for the Draov Foundation. Grant bought a ticket, showed up in a suit that cost $4,000, told himself he was there to help Ivy's investigation. But when he saw Selene across the gallery, standing beside a sculpture, laughing at something a donor said, the lie crumbled completely. He was there because he couldn't stay away. Because every article, every photograph, every mention of her success felt like watching someone he'd owned become someone he couldn't touch. Selene wore emerald green, her hair loose, diamond bracelet catching light every time she gestured. She looked happy. That was the worst part. She looked genuinely, authentically happy. Grant waited until she was alone, refreshing her champagne at the bar. Hello, Selene. She turned slowly, face carefully neutral. Grant? You look well. I am well. She accepted her glass from the bartender. Surprised to see you here. It's for a good cause. It is. Selene's eyes measured him. Or did you come to cause a scene? No, Grant struggled for words that didn't sound desperate. I wanted to talk. We don't have anything to talk about. I think we do. Selene sighed, glancing around the gallery. The auction wouldn't start for another 20 minutes. Fine, 5 minutes. Outside. She led him to a private terrace overlooking the Hudson River. The November air bit cold and sharp. Selene faced him, arms crossed. Talk. Grant had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times. Every version evaporated. I didn't know, he said finally. About the divorce. About Lucien. About any of it. I know you didn't. That was intentional. Why? Because you would have tried to stop it. Selene's voice stayed even, factual. Not because you loved me, because you didn't like losing control. The accuracy stung. That's not fair, Grant said. Fair? Something sharp entered Selene's eyes. You want to talk about fair? You spent 3 years barely acknowledging I existed. 3 years of canceled dinners and forgotten anniversaries and coming home smelling like her perfume. And I stayed silent because I thought, stupidly, that if I was just patient enough, just supportive enough, you'd eventually see me again. Selene, But you never did. She stepped closer. You looked at me every day and saw nothing, absolutely nothing. Do you know what that does to a person? To feel invisible inside your own marriage? Grant's throat felt tight. I'm sorry. Sorry. Selene laughed bitterly. You're sorry now because I left. Not because you hurt me. Because someone else showed you my value, and now you can't stand that I'm not yours anymore. That's not... It's exactly that. Selene's voice dropped low, dangerous. You didn't love me, Grant. You loved owning me. There's a difference. The words hit like a physical blow. Grant grabbed the terrace railing, knuckles white. And Lucien, he's what? Your savior? Your knight in shining armor? He's my partner. Selene's jaw set. He's someone who asks about my day and actually listens to the answer. Someone who supports my work instead of treating it like a hobby. Someone who makes me feel... She stopped. What? Grant pressed. Feel what? Alive. Selene's eyes blazed. He makes me feel alive. You made me feel like furniture. The silence stretched between them, filled only by river wind and distant traffic. I met Ivy Corbett, Grant said quietly. Selene went very still. What? She's investigating Lucien. Asked me to help. And did you? Her voice carried a warning. I'm thinking about it. Selene moved fast, faster than Grant expected, closing the distance between them until they were inches apart. Listen very carefully, she said, voice cold as river ice. I don't know what Ivy thinks she's found, and I don't care. Lucien's business is his business. But that foundation in there, the shelters we're building, the women we're helping, that's real. That's important. And if you do anything to jeopardize it because you're hurt and angry and can't accept that I'm happy without you, I will destroy you. Grant stared at her. You don't mean that. Try me. Selene stepped back, smoothing her dress. We're done here. Don't contact me again. Don't show up at my events. Don't use some journalist's conspiracy theories as an excuse to insert yourself back into my life. I've moved on, Grant. You should too. She walked back inside, leaving Grant alone on the terrace with the taste of ash in his mouth. He stood there for a long time, watching the river flow dark and indifferent below. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Ivy Corbett. I'm in. Tell me what you need. I'm sorry, I'm just talking about... The next month descended into controlled madness. Grant juggled his crumbling business reputation while feeding Ivy information he didn't have, chasing leads that went nowhere, and slowly watching his obsession metastasize into something he couldn't control. Vanessa called once. I heard you're spiraling, she said. No greeting, no warmth. I'm fine. You're not. Everyone's talking about it. She paused. You need to let her go, Grant. I have. Liar. Vanessa's voice softened slightly. I was angry at first, hurt, but now I just feel sorry for you. I don't need your pity. Then stop deserving it. She hung up before he could respond. Meanwhile, Ivy's investigation gained traction. She'd found a former associate of Lucien's, a man named Dimitri who'd fled to London and was willing to talk off the record. The allegations were explosive. Money laundering through shell corporations, bribes to government officials across Eastern Europe, connections to arms dealers operating in conflict zones, a network of intimidation and violence that kept witnesses silent and competitors buried. Ivy built her case methodically, cross-referencing financial records with testimony, tracking money through layers of offshore accounts. But she needed more. She needed proof that Lucien's current operations, the legitimate businesses, the foundation, were built on blood money, and she needed someone close to him to confirm it. Get me a meeting with Selene, Ivy said during one of their clandestine meetings. Just coffee, casual. I'll do the rest. She won't talk to me. Make her. Ivy's eyes were relentless. This is bigger than your marriage, Grant. If Lucien Draov is who I think he is, he's using that foundation as a front, laundering money through charity work, and your ex-wife is either his accomplice or his pawn. The accusation made Grant's blood run cold. Selene wouldn't what? Marry a criminal? Fall for a dangerous man? People do it every day. Ivy leaned forward. Get me that meeting. Grant wanted to refuse. Wanted to walk away from the whole poisonous mess. But the thought of Selene tangled up with someone truly dangerous, someone who'd hurt her eventually, it gnawed at him. So he agreed. Sure. Getting Selene to meet him required leverage. Grant used the only card he had left, their shared history. He sent a letter. Handwritten, delivered by courier. apologizing for everything. Not the hollow apologies of someone seeking forgiveness, but the raw, ugly admission of someone finally seeing his own failures clearly. He didn't expect it to work. It worked. Selene agreed to coffee. One meeting, neutral ground. They met at a small cafe in the West Village on a gray December afternoon. Snow threatened but hadn't fallen yet. The city felt suspended between seasons. Selene arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a black coat and no wedding ring. She'd worn Lucien's ring at every public event. Its absence felt deliberate. "Thank you for coming," Grant said as she sat. "I haven't decided if this is a mistake yet." Selene ordered black coffee, nothing else. They sat in uncomfortable silence until the coffee arrived. Grant spoke first. "I meant what I wrote, in the letter." "I know." Selene wrapped both hands around her cup. "That's why I'm here. I wanted to see if you'd actually changed or if it was just words." "And?" Still deciding. She studied him. "You look tired." "I am tired." "Business trouble?" "Something like that." Grant forced himself to hold her gaze. "Can I ask you something?" Selene's eyes narrowed slightly. "Depends. Are you happy? Really happy?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She looked away, out the cafe window at the gray street beyond. "Yes," she said finally. "I am." "With Lucien?" "With my life." Selene turned back to him. "Lucien is part of that. But it's bigger than him. It's the foundation, the work, the feeling that what I'm doing matters. I spent years being decorative. Now I'm useful. That's happiness." Grant felt something crack in his chest. "I should have seen that in you." "Yes," Selene agreed simply. "You should have." They drank coffee in silence. Grant thought about Ivy waiting for confirmation, about the recording device hidden in his jacket pocket, about the betrayal he was seconds away from committing. He thought about Selene's foundation, the women it helped, the lives it changed. He thought about Lucien Draov's cold eyes and colder threats, and he made a choice. "There's something you should know," Grant said carefully. "A journalist named Ivy Corbett is investigating Lucien. She's building a story about his business empire, allegations of money laundering, criminal connections, worse." Selene went very still. "How do you know this?" "She approached me weeks ago, wanted me to help." "And did you?" Selene's voice could cut glass. Grant met her eyes. "I told her no." It was a lie. But it was the first lie he'd told to protect Selene instead of himself. "If she publishes this story," Grant continued, "it will destroy the foundation. All of it. The shelters, the programs, everything you've built. Lucien might survive, men like him always do, but the foundation won't." Selene's face had gone pale. "What does she have?" "I don't know exactly. Financial records, testimony from former associates, enough to raise serious questions." "Jesus," Selene set her cup down with shaking hands. "Does Lucien know?" "I have no idea." Selene pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen, texting someone, probably Lucien. Grant watched her, this woman he'd married and never known, and felt the full weight of what he'd just set in motion. When she looked up, her eyes were hard. "Thank you for telling me." "Selene." "Don't." She stood, grabbing her coat. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. You helped me because it served you in some way. You always do." "That's not—" "Goodbye, Grant." She left without looking back. Grant sat alone with cold coffee and the terrible knowledge that he'd just ignited a war he couldn't control. His phone buzzed. Text from Ivy. "Did you get it?" Grant looked at the recording device in his jacket, still running, still capturing everything. But Selene hadn't confirmed anything, hadn't admitted anything Ivy could use. Grant turned off the recorder and typed back. "Meeting happened. She didn't give us anything." Ivy's response came fast. "Keep trying." Grant deleted the recording, turned off his phone, and sat in that cafe until the staff started putting chairs on tables, wondering when exactly he'd become the villain in his own story. The exposé dropped 3 weeks later like a bomb. Metropolitan Review's cover screamed, "The Draov Empire: How Billions in Criminal Money Built Manhattan's Newest Charity." Inside, 20 pages of investigative journalism detailing Lucien Draov's alleged connections to money laundering operations, shell corporations funneling money from Eastern European crime syndicates, and accusations of witness intimidation spanning 2 decades. The article stopped just short of calling him a criminal, but the implication was clear, and the foundation, Selene's foundation, was painted as either willfully ignorant or complicit in laundering dirty money through charitable work. Manhattan erupted. News vans crowded outside foundation offices. Board members resigned. Major donors pulled funding. Politicians who'd stood beside Selene at galas suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Grant watched it unfold from his office, feeling sick. He called Ivy. "You promised you'd keep the foundation out of it." "I promised no such thing." Her voice was sharp, triumphant. "This is journalism, Grant. We follow the money wherever it goes, and it went straight through that foundation. You're destroying innocent people. I'm exposing the truth." A pause. "You helped make this happen. Don't pretend you have clean hands." Grant hung up. For 3 days, the story dominated every news cycle. Talking heads debated on television. Social media exploded with outrage and conspiracy theories. Federal investigators released carefully worded statements about ongoing inquiries. Selene issued one public statement defending the foundation's finances and transparency. She looked exhausted in the press conference footage, haunted. Lucien Draov said nothing, but businesses connected to his empire began moving, liquidating assets, restructuring. Offshore accounts emptied and refilled in different jurisdictions. Whatever Lucien was doing, he was doing it fast. On the 4th day, Grant received a phone call from a blocked number. He answered. Silence. Then Lucien's voice, soft and lethal. "You made a choice." Grant's blood went cold. "I didn't. Don't insult me by lying." Background noise suggested Lucien was in a car, moving. "I warned you what would happen if you interfered. I was trying to protect. You were trying to hurt me, and you used Selene to do it." The car sound stopped. A door opened, closed. That was a mistake. The line went dead. Grant sat frozen, phone pressed to his ear, listening to silence. His hands were shaking. That night, 3 things happened in rapid succession. First, Grant's largest investor pulled out of a $50 million development deal. No explanation, just a terse email and a canceled contract. Second, 2 of Grant's board members resigned via identical letters, citing differences in vision and leadership concerns. Third, the IRS announced an audit of Grant's personal and business finances going back 7 years. It wasn't coincidence. It was Lucien Draov keeping his promise. Grant poured himself whiskey with shaking hands and stared at the Manhattan skyline, watching his entire world systematically dismantle itself. And somewhere across that same skyline, Selene was fighting to save a foundation that might be built on blood money, married to a man who could destroy lives with a phone call, caught in a war Grant had started and couldn't stop. He'd wanted to protect her. Instead, he'd set her world on fire. The whiskey tasted like ash. Outside, snow finally started falling over Manhattan, soft and white and merciless, covering everything ugly until morning came and melted it all away. Grant understood then with horrible clarity that there was no going back from this. No apology that would fix it, no redemption arc waiting in the wings. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And whatever came next, whatever Lucien had planned, whatever Selene thought of him now, Grant would have to face it, knowing he'd become exactly the kind of man he'd once despised. Small, spiteful, willing to destroy beautiful things because he couldn't possess them. He finished his drink and poured another, watching snow erase Manhattan one flake at a time, waiting for the hammer to fall. The IRS audit began on a Tuesday morning with 3 federal agents sitting across from Grant in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and institutional disinfect. They were polite, professional, thorough. They were also destroying him. "Mr. Mercer, can you explain this transfer from your personal account to an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands?" The lead agent, a woman named Morrison with gray hair and eyes like an accountant, slid a document across the table. Grant studied it. His signature, his account, a transfer he'd never made. "I've never seen this before," he said. Morrison's expression didn't change. It's dated 8 months ago. Your signature, your account number. Then it's a forgery. We'll need to verify that. She produced another document, then another. A paper trail of transactions Grant didn't recognize, moving money through accounts he'd never opened, to places he'd never been. Someone had built an entire financial crime spree in his name. And Grant knew exactly who. The audit lasted 6 hours. When it finally ended, Grant's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, who charged $800 an hour, pulled him aside in the hallway. "This is bad," she said quietly. "Really bad. Someone set you up beautifully. The documentation is flawless. If we can't prove these are forgeries, you're looking at federal charges." "How long do we have?" "To build a defense? Months. Maybe a year if we're lucky." Patricia checked her watch. "But the damage is already done. News will leak. Probably already has. Your investors, your board, your reputation, it's all going to crater before we ever see a courtroom." Grant leaned against the wall, feeling the building tilt around him. "Can we trace who did this? We can try. But whoever orchestrated it knew what they were doing. These aren't amateur mistakes." Patricia's eyes softened slightly. "Grant, you need to prepare for the possibility that we never find proof, that you have to rebuild from nothing." "I don't have nothing. I have—" He stopped. What did he have? A business bleeding investors. A reputation shredded by scandal. Friends who'd stopped returning calls. An ex-wife who hated him. And a very dangerous man systematically dismantling everything he'd spent 2 decades building. "Yeah," Grant said quietly. "Nothing." Patricia squeezed his shoulder once, an uncharacteristic gesture, and left. Grant stood alone in the government building hallway, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and felt the last threads of his old life snap. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. "Emergency board meeting called. They're voting you out." "I'm sorry." Grant didn't respond. He walked out of the building into cold December sunlight that felt like a sentencing. The board meeting happened without him. They took his company, the firm he'd built from 3 employees in a rented office into a Manhattan powerhouse, and voted him out in under an hour. Marcus called afterward, voice tight with something between guilt and relief. "It's done. They offered a severance package. It's generous, considering." "Considering what?" Grant stood at his penthouse window, watching the city that had once felt like his kingdom. "Considering they could have left you with nothing." Marcus paused. "Take the deal, Grant. Walk away while you still can." "And do what?" "I don't know. Something that doesn't involve getting crushed by Lucien Draov." Grant laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "It's too late for that." "It's never too late to stop digging." But Grant was already buried. After Marcus hung up, Grant poured himself whiskey and sat in the gathering darkness of his penthouse, not bothering to turn on lights. His phone kept buzzing, news alerts, his name attached to words like investigation and fraud and scandal. He turned it off, sat in silence. And for the first time since the gala, since Selene had walked onto that stage and atomized his world, Grant allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he'd lost. Not the business, not the money, but the man he'd thought he was. The competent, successful, in-control Grant Mercer who always landed on his feet. That man was gone. In his place sat someone Grant didn't recognize. Someone weak and vindictive and stupid enough to pick a fight with a man who played by rules Grant didn't understand. He sat there until the whiskey was gone and Manhattan's lights blurred together into a smear of gold and white. Then his door buzzer rang. Grant ignored it. It rang again. Longer, insistent. He dragged himself to the intercom. "What?" "Mr. Mercer." Unfamiliar voice. Male. Careful. "I have a delivery for you. Needs a signature." "Leave it with the doorman." "Can't. Requires direct signature. Won't take a minute." Grant was too tired to argue. He buzzed the man up. 60 seconds later, someone knocked. Grant opened the door to find a courier in a plain uniform holding a manila envelope. "Grant Mercer?" "That's me." "Sign here." Grant scrawled his signature, took the envelope, started to close the door. The courier's hand shot out, stopping it. "Mr. Mercer, I'm supposed to make sure you open it. Sender's instructions." Something in the man's eyes made Grant's stomach tighten. Professional, alert, not a courier at all. Security, Lucien's security. Grant opened the envelope with hands that wanted to shake. Inside, a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photograph showed Ivy Corbett, sitting at an outdoor cafe, talking to someone across the table whose face was turned away from the camera. But Grant recognized his own jacket, his own profile. The photo was from their first meeting, 2 months ago, before everything exploded. The note was written in precise, elegant handwriting. You helped start a war. Now you'll help me end it. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. Address below. Come alone. It was signed with a single letter, D. Grant looked up. The courier, the security operative, watched him with flat, professional eyes. He'll know if you don't show, the man said quietly. Then he turned and walked away. Grant closed the door, stood holding the photograph and note. His reflection stared back from the darkened window, haggard, defeated, trapped. He'd thought he was protecting Selene by warning her about Ivy's investigation. He'd thought he was being noble by refusing to record their conversation. But Lucien had known everything all along, had been watching, waiting, building a case against Grant that would justify whatever came next. Grant poured more whiskey with hands that definitely shook now. Tomorrow at 8, he'd walk into whatever hell Lucien Draov had prepared. Or he'd run. Disappear. Start over somewhere Lucien's reach didn't extend. The thought lasted about 5 seconds before Grant realized the truth. There was nowhere Lucien's reach didn't extend. Men like that didn't just have money. They had infrastructure, networks, the kind of power that made borders irrelevant and hiding places temporary. Grant drank and stared at the address written on the note. A warehouse in Red Hook, industrial, isolated, the kind of place where people disappeared. Grant didn't sleep. He spent the night putting his affairs in order with the grim efficiency of a man writing his own eulogy. Emails to his lawyer, instructions for his accounts, a letter to his mother that said nothing and everything. He didn't write to Selene. What would he say? Sorry I tried to destroy your husband and accidentally set your life on fire? At 7:30 the next evening, Grant stood in his closet trying to decide what you wore to your own execution. He settled on jeans and a sweater. No point pretending this was a business meeting. The Uber ride to Red Hook took 40 minutes through evening traffic. The driver tried making small talk about the weather. Grant stared out the window and said nothing. The warehouse sat on a forgotten stretch of waterfront surrounded by shipping containers and industrial decay. No lights, no signs of life. Just a single black SUV parked near the entrance. Grant paid the driver and stepped out into cold that cut through his coat. The warehouse door stood slightly open. Grant pushed through. Inside, a vast empty space lit by a single work light hanging from the ceiling. Concrete floors. High ceilings crisscrossed with metal beams, the smell of rust and old machinery. And in the center, beneath that single light, Lucien Draov sat in a folding chair. Alone. No guards. No muscle. Just the man himself. Somehow that was more terrifying. Close the door, Lucien said. Not loud. He didn't need to be loud. Grant closed it, walked forward, stopped 10 feet away. You came, Lucien observed. Smarter than I expected. What do you want? Sit. Lucien gestured to a second folding chair across from him. Grant sat. They faced each other in that pool of light, 2 men in an empty warehouse, and Grant realized this wasn't an execution. It was an interrogation. Tell me about Ivy Corbett, Lucien said. I don't. Lucien's voice stayed soft, deadly. I know you met with her. Multiple times. I know you fed her information. I know you wore a recording device to your meeting with Selene. Grant's heart stopped. I deleted the recording. Yes, you did. Lucien leaned forward slightly. Why? The question caught Grant off guard. What? Why delete it? You went to all that trouble, set up the meeting, got Selene to trust you just enough to sit down. Then you deleted the only evidence Corbett needed. Lucien's eyes were utterly black in the dim light. Why? Grant's throat felt tight. Because it would have destroyed the foundation. You don't care about the foundation. No, but Selene does. The answer hung between them. Lucien studied Grant with the intensity of a surgeon examining a specimen. "You still love her," he said finally. Not a question. "I never stopped." "You never started." Lucien sat back. "Love requires seeing someone, knowing them. You did neither. What you feel now isn't love. It's regret with nowhere to go." The words landed like body blows. Grant's hands clenched. "Why am I here?" "Because you created a problem." Lucien pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen, turned it to face Grant. "This is Ivy Corbett's article. The expose that's currently destroying Selene's foundation, my reputation, and the lives of 200 women who depend on our shelters." Grant stared at the screen. Headlines, photos, damage he couldn't undo. "I tried to stop it," he said. "No. You tried to have it both ways." Lucien's voice hardened. "You wanted to hurt me while protecting Selene, but the world doesn't work that way. Actions have consequences. You taught me that about myself once, remember? At the gala, when you looked at me like I'd stolen something that belonged to you." "Selene never belonged to me." "Finally, the truth." Lucien took the tablet back. "Here's another truth. That article? Built partially on information only you could have provided. Meeting times, details about Selene's schedule, financial patterns in my businesses that only someone with inside access to her calendar would notice." Grant felt cold spread through his chest. "I never did it. You didn't mean to, but Corbett is good at her job. She extracted what she needed through questions you didn't realize you were answering." Lucien's eyes narrowed. "So now we have a situation, federal investigations, donors fleeing, media vultures circling, and all of it traces back, directly or indirectly, to you. What do you want from me?" "The only thing that matters." Lucien stood, walked to the edge of the light. "I want you to fix this." "I can't." "Yes, you can." Lucien turned. "Corbett's article relies heavily on testimony from a man named Dmitry Volkov, former associate of mine who fled to London. He's the cornerstone of her entire investigation." Grant's stomach dropped. "You want me to—" "I want you to discredit him." Lucien walked back, stood directly over Grant. "You're going to reach out to Corbett. Tell her you have information about Volkov, that he approached you months ago trying to sell fabricated testimony against me, that he's a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind and a history of lying to journalists." "She won't believe me." "She will, because you'll provide documentation." Lucien pulled a flash drive from his pocket, dropped it in Grant's lap. "Bank statements showing Volkov received payments from my competitors, emails proving he shopped his story to multiple outlets, evidence that his testimony is bought and paid for." Grant stared at the flash drive. "Is it real? Does it matter?" "Yes." Lucien smiled, cold, mirthless. "Some of it is real. Some of it is enhanced. Volkov did approach competitors. He did try to sell his story. Whether the payments happened exactly as documented?" He shrugged. "That's for journalists to verify." "You're asking me to lie." "I'm asking you to fix the mess you helped create." Lucien crouched down, eye level with Grant. "The foundation is bleeding. Every day that article stays credible, more women lose access to shelter, to safety, to hope. You started this. You help end it. And if I don't? Then the federal case against you suddenly has a lot more evidence. Turns out you weren't just committing tax fraud, you were also laundering money for me. Unwittingly, of course. But the paper trail is very convincing." Grant's hands went numb. "You'd frame me." "I'd reveal the truth." Lucien stood. "You did launder money for me, Grant, just not the way you think. Every time you met with Corbett, you were converting her investigation into publicity that forced me to move assets, to restructure, to clean money in ways I wouldn't have otherwise bothered with. You became my unwitting accomplice the moment you stuck your nose where it didn't belong." The logic was twisted but airtight. Grant looked up at this man, this dangerous, brilliant man, and understood why Selene had chosen him. Lucien saw angles Grant couldn't imagine, played games Grant didn't know existed. "How do I know you won't destroy me anyway?" Grant asked. "You don't." Lucien walked back to his chair, sat. "But consider this. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. If I wanted you in prison, you'd be there. What I want is much simpler. I want you to be useful. Then I want you to disappear from Celine's life forever. She already hates me. She doesn't hate you, she pities you, which is worse. Lucien's expression softened fractionally. Selene is brilliant and kind and stronger than either of us deserves. She built that foundation from nothing, poured her soul into it, and watching it crumble is destroying her. For the first time, Grant heard something almost human in Lucien's voice. Love. Protective, fierce, absolute love. The kind Grant had never given Selene. Fix this, Lucien said quietly. Not for me. For her. Do one decent thing in this entire disaster and help me save what she built. Grant looked at the flash drive in his hand. Thought about Ivy Corbett's triumphant voice on the phone. Thought about federal agents and forensic accountants and manufactured evidence. Thought about Selene's exhausted face at that press conference. He'd started this trying to hurt Lucien. Now he had a chance to help Selene. The irony would have been funny if it didn't taste like ash. One condition, Grant said. Lucien waited. After this is done, you leave me alone. Completely. Drop the federal case. Remove whatever evidence you've planted. Let me rebuild my life without looking over my shoulder. Agreed. And Selene never knows I helped. Something flickered across Lucien's face. Respect, maybe. Or surprise. She'll never hear it from me, he said. Grant pocketed the flash drive, stood on unsteady legs. How do I contact you when it's done? Lucien handed him a burner phone. One number programmed. Text when Corbett publishes the retraction. Grant took it, started toward the door. Mercer. He turned. Lucien hadn't moved from his chair. You asked me once what Selene sees in me. I didn't. You didn't have to ask. It was written all over your face. Lucien's expression was unreadable. I'll tell you. She sees someone who shows up, who does the work, who makes the hard choices when they matter. That's not complicated. It's just rare. The words hit harder than any threat. Grant left the warehouse and stood in the cold Red Hook darkness, watching his breath fog in the air. His phone, his real phone, had 17 missed calls. Messages from his lawyer, his accountant, his mother. He ignored them all. Called an Uber. And during the long ride back to Manhattan, Grant made a decision that would have shocked the man he'd been 6 months ago. He was going to help Lucien Draov, not to save himself, not to win Selene back, but because, for the first time in his entire privileged, self-centered life, Grant understood what it meant to put someone else's needs above his own survival. The next morning, Grant called Ivy Corbett. I need to meet with you, he said. I have information about Dmitry Volkov. Ivy's voice sharpened immediately. What kind of information? The kind that changes everything. Grant stared at the flash drive on his desk. Can you come to my office in an hour? I'll be there in 30. She arrived in 25, laptop bag over her shoulder and the hungry look of a journalist smelling blood. Grant ushered her into his office, soon to be his former office, once the board finalized his removal, and closed the door. Talk, Ivy said, already pulling out her laptop. Grant handed her the flash drive. Dmitry Volkov contacted me 4 months ago, before I ever met you. He wanted money to testify against Lucien Draov. Ivy's eyes narrowed. You never mentioned this. Never? Because I didn't take him seriously. Thought he was just another grifter. Grant leaned against his desk. But after your article published, I started digging, called some contacts, found some things that made me concerned about the credibility of your source. What things? Everything on that drive. Bank records showing Volkov received payments from 3 of Lucien's competitors in the last year. Emails where he offered to testify against Draov for a price. Evidence that he's been shopping the same story to multiple outlets, adjusting details based on who's paying. Ivy plugged in the drive, started clicking through files. Her expression shifted from skepticism to concern to horror. Jesus, she whispered. I'm sorry, Grant said, and meant it. I should have told you about Volkov approaching me, but I didn't realize he was your primary source until after you published. Ivy kept scrolling, reading, her face going pale. If this is real, it's real. I verified what I could independently. The bank accounts exist. The payments happened. Whether Volkov's testimony about Lucien is false or just, financially motivated. Grant shrugged. That's for you to determine. But your article relied heavily on his accusations. If he's not credible, the whole thing falls apart. Ivy closed her laptop, sat in silence. Why are you giving me this? She asked finally. You wanted Lucien destroyed. I wanted to hurt him. There's a difference. Grant moved to the window. But my ex-wife's foundation is caught in the crossfire. Women are losing access to shelters. And if I'm responsible for that because I helped you build a case on bad information, he turned to face her. I can't live with that. The lie came out smooth, natural, because it wasn't entirely a lie. Grant did care about the foundation. He just cared more about not spending the next decade in federal prison. Ivy stood, unplugged the drive. I need to verify this independently. Of course. If it's real, if Volkov really is compromised, I'll have to issue a retraction, maybe a follow-up piece exposing him as a source. That's your call. Ivy studied Grant with new suspicion. This is very convenient for you. It's convenient for the truth. The truth. Ivy laughed bitterly. Everyone in this city has their own version of that. She left. Grant stood at his window and waited. 3 days later, the Metropolitan Review published a front-page retraction. The headline, Key Source in Draov Investigation Exposed as Paid Informant with History of False Testimony, Ivy's byline. Thorough. Devastating. She dismantled her own investigation piece by piece, revealing how Dmitry Volkov had been compromised, how the financial evidence didn't hold up under scrutiny, how the entire case against Lucien Draov, while containing threads of truth, relied too heavily on one unreliable witness. The retraction didn't exonerate Lucien completely, but it gutted the story's credibility. Within hours, media coverage shifted from criminal empire to rush to judgment to journalists burned by fraudulent source. The Foundation's board issued a statement. Donors started calling back. Federal investigators quietly closed preliminary inquiries. Grant watched it all unfold from his emptying office, packing boxes around him as the company he'd built moved on without him. His phone buzzed. Text from the burner Lucien had given him. Unknown number. Well done. Then seconds later, check your accounts. Grant opened his banking app. The federal fraud charges had vanished from his records. The forensic audit ended. The manufactured evidence disappeared like it had never existed. Lucien had kept his word. Grant was free. Broke, unemployed, and reputation shredded, but free. He texted back. We're done? Almost. One last thing. A new message appeared. Not text. A photo. Selene, sitting in what looked like the Foundation's office, laughing at something off camera, genuinely happy. The exhaustion gone from her face. Below the photo, she doesn't know you helped, and she never will. But I wanted you to see what you saved. Grant stared at the photo until his vision blurred. Selene looked beautiful, free, whole. Everything she'd never been with him. He deleted the burner's number, threw the phone in the trash, sat in his empty office surrounded by boxes and the ruins of his old life. And for the first time since the night he'd planned to destroy his marriage at the Blackwell Legacy Gala, Grant Mercer felt something other than regret. He felt tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing tired. But beneath that exhaustion lived the smallest seed of something else. Not redemption. He didn't deserve redemption. But maybe, the possibility of becoming someone who could. Outside his window, December snow fell over Manhattan, covering the city in white so pure it almost looked like forgiveness. Grant knew better. Forgiveness had to be earned, and he'd only just started paying the price. Oops. 2 weeks later, Grant signed the severance papers that officially ended his tenure at the company he'd built. The board was generous, probably because they wanted him gone quietly. Enough money to live on for a year, maybe 2 if he was careful. Careful had never been Grant's style, but neither had humility, and he was learning both now, one devastating lesson at a time. He moved out of the penthouse. Too many memories, too much space for one person to rattle around in. Found a smaller apartment in Brooklyn. 2 bedrooms. Normal. Anonymous. The kind of place where Grant Mercer, the failed Manhattan power player, could disappear into unremarkable middle-class obscurity. He spent his days walking, thinking, trying to figure out who he was without the title, the power, the identity he'd built over 2 decades. Turned out he didn't know. On Christmas Eve, Grant sat alone in his new apartment eating Chinese takeout and watching snow fall outside his window. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Grant? Marcus's voice, cautious. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Silence stretched. How are you holding up? Marcus asked finally. I'm alive. That's something. Yeah. Marcus cleared his throat. Listen, I'm calling because there's a development firm in Chicago, smaller operation, good people. They're looking for a consultant, project management. Nothing glamorous, but solid work. Grant sat up. How? Yeah. I made some calls, called in some favors. Marcus paused. I know things ended badly, but you're good at what you do, Grant. What happened with Selene, with Draov, with all of it, that was personal shit spiraling out of control. It doesn't erase 20 years of knowing how to build things. Grant's throat felt tight. Marcus, I'm not saying they'll hire you, but they'll talk to you. That's more than most people in this city will do right now. Another pause. You interested? Grant looked around his small apartment, at the life he had left, then thought about Celine's face in that photo. Happy, free, moving forward. Yeah, he said. I'm interested. Good. I'll send you the contact info. Marcus's voice softened. Grant, what you did, helping with the retraction, saving the foundation, I don't know the full story, but people noticed. Not publicly, but the right people. It matters. Thanks. After Marcus hung up, Grant sat in the dark with his lukewarm Chinese food and something that felt almost like hope stirring in his chest. It was small, fragile, barely enough to matter. But it was there. And for the first time since watching his entire world collapse at the Blackwell Legacy Gala, Grant allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the story didn't end here. Maybe this was just the part where the old Grant died, and someone better learned how to take his first breath. Outside, church bells rang across the city, marking midnight. Christmas morning, a day for miracles and second chances, and believing broken things could be made whole. Grant didn't believe in miracles, but he was starting to believe in work, in showing up, and making the hard choices when they mattered. The same things Lucien had said Selene saw in him. Grant stood, threw away his takeout containers, made himself a drink, raised his glass to the snowy city beyond his window. Here's to becoming someone better, he said to the empty room. Then he drank and sat down at his laptop and opened the email Marcus had sent. The Chicago firm. New beginning. Small steps. It wasn't redemption, but it was movement. And movement, forward, painful, uncertain, was better than drowning in place. Grant started writing his response, fingers hesitant on the keys, building something new from the wreckage of everything old. Somewhere across the city, Selene was probably at some charity event or foundation gala. Lucien at her side, living the life Grant had been too blind to appreciate when it was his. He hoped she was happy. Meant it this time. Not with the desperate hope of winning her back, but with the quiet acceptance of someone finally understanding what love actually required. Seeing someone, all of them, and choosing to stay anyway. Grant had never done that. But maybe, in Chicago, in some future he couldn't yet imagine, he'd learn how. He finished the email, hit send, sat back, breathed, and waited to see if the man he was trying to become would be enough to build a life worth living. The city glittered beyond his window, cold and beautiful and indifferent. Grant watched it for a long time. Then he turned off the lights, went to bed, and slept without nightmares for the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. He'd face it, and maybe, just maybe, he'd survive. The Chicago offer came through on New Year's Day. Grant read the email 3 times, sitting at his kitchen table with coffee gone cold and morning light streaming through windows that overlooked a Brooklyn street he still didn't recognize as home. The firm, Barrington Development Group, wanted him to start mid-January. Consulting role, project oversight, decent salary. Nothing close to what he'd made in Manhattan, but enough to rebuild something resembling a life. Grant typed his acceptance with hands that almost didn't shake. Hit send. Felt nothing. No relief. No excitement. Just the hollow acknowledgement that he was still breathing and needed somewhere to go. He spent the next 2 weeks closing out his New York life, selling furniture, canceling memberships, avoiding places where people might recognize him. On his last night in the city, Grant walked through Central Park as January cold cut through his coat like knives. The park was empty, too cold for tourists, too late for joggers, just Grant and the skeletal trees and the distant sound of traffic that never stopped. He was halfway across when he saw her. Selene, standing alone near Bethesda Fountain, staring at the frozen water. Grant's first instinct was to run. His second was to hide. He did neither, just stood there 20 yards away watching her. She wore a long black coat, hair pulled back, no makeup visible from this distance. She looked tired. Not the exhausted desperation from the press conference, but the deep fatigue of someone carrying weight nobody else could see. Grant must have made a sound, a step, a breath, because she turned. Their eyes met. For 5 seconds, neither moved. Then Selene walked toward him with slow, deliberate steps that felt like sentencing. She stopped 3 feet away. "Grant!" Selene. Silence stretched between them, cold and brittle. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Walking, last night in the city. I'm moving to Chicago tomorrow." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. "Chicago?" "Consulting job, fresh start, all the cliches." Grant shoved his hands in his pockets. "You?" "Needed air. Foundation's hosting a gala next week, planning meetings all day." She glanced back at the fountain. "Sometimes this city feels like it's suffocating me." "I know the feeling." More silence. Grant knew he should walk away, should say goodbye and let her return to her life without his ghost hovering around it. But something kept him rooted. "I heard about the retraction," Selene said quietly. "Ivy Corbett's article." Grant's chest tightened. "Yeah." "That was unexpected. The whole thing with Dmitry Volkov being compromised." She turned to face him fully. "How did you know about him?" "I didn't, not really. Just got lucky digging around." Selene studied him with those intelligent eyes that saw too much. "Lucky. Sometimes things work out." "Not for you they haven't. Not lately." Her voice carried something between pity and curiosity. "Why did you help? After everything with Ivy, after trying to—" She stopped, started again. "Why help Lucien?" "I didn't help Lucien." Grant met her eyes. "I helped the foundation, the women who need it. That's different." "Is it?" "Yes." Selene wrapped her coat tighter against the wind. "You're lying, but thank you anyway." "I'm not—" "Grant." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the lines around her eyes, new since the divorce. "I've spent 3 years reading your lies. I know what they look like. Whatever you did, however you got that information to Corbett, it wasn't luck. It was something else." Grant's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "No." Selene shook her head. "I suppose it doesn't. The foundation survived. That's what matters." "And you? Did you survive?" The question surprised them both. Selene looked away, back toward the fountain. "I'm still here." "That's not what I asked." "I know." She exhaled slowly, breath fogging in the cold air. "The truth? Some days I wonder if any of this was worth it. The divorce, the foundation, Lucien, all of it. Some days I wake up exhausted and angry and wondering if I just traded one cage for another." Grant felt his heart stumble. "Selene, but then I remember how invisible I felt with you. How I spent every morning waking up next to someone who looked through me like I was glass." She turned back to him. "And I know, no matter how hard this is, it's better than that. Being seen, even when it's complicated and messy and sometimes scary, is better than being invisible." The words landed like bullets. Grant swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for all of it, for not seeing you, for—" "I know." Selene's voice softened. "You've said it before, and I believe you. But sorry doesn't change anything. It just makes the guilty feel better." "Then what does change things?" "Time, distance, becoming someone different." She smiled sadly. "Which is what you're doing. Chicago, new start. Good for you, Grant. I mean that." "Do you love him?" The question ripped out before Grant could stop it. "Lucien, do you actually love him, or is he just what? My rebellion? My revenge?" Selene's eyes hardened. You don't get to ask me that. You lost that right when you stopped caring about the answer years ago. That's not fair. Neither is standing in a frozen park defending a marriage you destroyed. Selene stepped back. I have to go. Lucien's waiting. Of course he is. Goodbye, Grant. I hope Chicago gives you whatever you're looking for. She walked away. Grant watched her go, every step taking her further from whatever they'd once been, and felt the last thread connecting them snap. He stood alone in the cold for another hour. Then he went back to his apartment, finished packing, and tried to sleep. Failed. At 3 a.m, his phone rang. Unknown number. Grant answered with his heart pounding. Hello? Heavy breathing, labored, wet. Grant Mercer? A man's voice, thick accent, Slavic. Who is this? Dmitry Volkov. Grant sat up so fast he knocked over the water glass on his nightstand. How did you get your number? I have many friends, many resources. Volkov coughed. It sounded painful. You destroyed me. I didn't. Corbett's retraction. Your information. Now I am nothing, worse than nothing. I am exposed. My testimony worthless. People I sold information to want their money back. Another cough. You understand what that means? These people do not accept refunds. Grant's mouth went dry. What do you want? Justice. Revenge. Same thing, yes? Volkov's breathing rattled. I told truth about Draov. Real truth. He is monster. Criminal. Everything I said was real, but you helped him bury it. Volkov, you think he is finished with you? You think helping him makes you safe? A bitter laugh that turned into coughing. You are fool. Draov uses people. When he is done, he discards them or buries them. You will learn. I don't. You want real story? About what Draov does? About the woman you helped him keep? Volkov's voice dropped low. Meet me. Tomorrow. Before you run to Chicago like coward. I will tell you everything. Then you decide if you made right choice. I'm not meeting you. Yes, you are. Something shuffled on Volkov's end. Papers. Movement. Because part of you knows truth, knows you helped a dangerous man keep innocent woman trapped, and that guilt will eat you alive if you do not know for certain. The line went dead. Grant sat in darkness, phone pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. His hands were shaking. He should delete the call, block the number, get on tomorrow's flight to Chicago and never look back. But Volkov's words burrowed deep. You help dangerous man keep innocent woman trapped. Was Selene trapped? She'd said she was happy, said being seen was worth the complications. But she'd also said some days she wondered if she'd traded one cage for another. Grant didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, his phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number. Address in Queens. Time, 2 p.m. Then, come alone. Tell no one. Draov has eyes everywhere. Grant stared at the message until his screen went dark. Every rational instinct screamed this was a trap. Every rational instinct said walking into that meeting would destroy the fragile peace he'd built. But the irrational part, the part that still saw Selene's tired eyes last night, the part that wondered if he'd saved her or doomed her, wouldn't shut up. At 1:30, Grant called an Uber to Queens. The address led to a rundown motel off the BQE, cracked parking lot, flickering neon sign, the kind of place people went to disappear or die. Room 14 was at the far end, door slightly ajar. Grant stood outside for 30 seconds, every nerve screaming to run. He pushed the door open. Inside, cheap furniture, stained carpet, and Dmitry Volkov sitting on the edge of the bed looking like death warmed over. Mid-50s. Gray stubble. Sunken eyes. A bruise darkening his left cheek. His breathing wheezed with the sound of broken ribs. Someone had beaten him badly. Recently. You came. Volkov gestured weakly to the chair near the window. Smart. Or stupid. Maybe both. Grant stayed near the door. What do you want? To show you truth. Volkov pulled a laptop from beside the bed, opened it with trembling hands. Everything I told Corbett was real, but she needed proof. Draov is very good at hiding proof, killing proof, buying proof. If you have evidence, give it to the police. Police? Volkov laughed. bitter and broken. Police in New York work for men like Draov, not against them. I tried once. Detective I spoke with? Found dead 2 weeks later. Suicide, they said. Bullet in back of head. Some suicide, yes? Grant's stomach turned. Why tell me? Because you helped him. Because you think you saved woman you love. Because you are blind fool who does not see cage he helped build. Volkov turned the laptop toward Grant. Look. The screen showed financial documents, shell corporations, money transfers. Grant recognized some from Ivy's original investigation. Others were new. This, Volkov tapped the screen, shows how Draov moves money. Not just from shipping, from weapons, from trafficking, from debts paid in blood across Eastern Europe and Russia. This doesn't prove... Look closer. Volkov pulled up another file. Photos. Grainy surveillance shots of Lucien meeting with men in expensive suits. Time-stamped. Locations marked. These men, Volkov said, pointing, are Bratva, Russian mob. This one runs prostitution rings from Moscow to Berlin. This one smuggles weapons to conflict zones. This one disappeared 3 journalists who asked wrong questions. Grant felt cold spreading through his chest. Where did you get these? I worked for Draov for 7 years. I see things. I photograph things. I am insurance policy, yes? But insurance only works if you live long enough to use it. Volkov closed the laptop. Now I am dying. They found me in London, beat me, told me to disappear or disappear permanently. So I come to New York. One last chance to expose truth. Why not just publish this yourself? Because I am compromised source, remember? Thanks to your information, nobody believes Dmitry Volkov anymore. I am joke. I am liar. I am disgraced informant who sells fake testimony. He met Grant's eyes. You did that. You and Draov together. Guilt crashed over Grant like a wave. But you, Volkov continued, you are credible. Rich man who lost everything. No reason to lie. You publish this, people listen. You give evidence to right journalist. Not Corbett, she is burned, but someone clean, someone brave. Then truth comes out. And Selene? Grant asked quietly. What happens to her? She is collateral damage. Volkov shrugged. Sad but necessary. Foundation will collapse. Her name will be destroyed. She will lose everything, but she will be free. Free from monster wearing expensive suit. Grant stood. I'm not doing this. You help him again, after seeing proof? I don't know what this proves. These could be fake. Doctored. Another story you're selling to another fool desperate enough to believe it. Look at me. Volkov stood, painfully, holding his ribs. Look at what they did. You think I fake these bruises? This blood? He spit into the sink, pink and red. I am dead man. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but dead. Only question is whether truth dies with me. Grant moved toward the door. Find someone else. There is no one else. Volkov's voice cracked. You think I want to give this to man who destroyed my credibility? You think I trust you? I am desperate. And you should be too, because when Draov is finished with you, when you are no longer useful, I'm done. Grant pulled the door open. Whatever game you're playing, leave me out of it. Not game, not... Volkov's words cut off in a coughing fit that doubled him over. Grant paused in the doorway. Watched this broken man struggle to breathe. Remembered Lucien's cold eyes in that warehouse. Remembered Selene saying some days she wondered if she'd traded one cage for another. Send me the files, Grant said quietly. Volkov looked up. Blood on his lips. What? Send me everything. I'll look at it, verify what I can. Then I'll decide. You will publish? I'll decide, Grant repeated. Give me your email. I'll send you a secure address. Volkov recited an email. Grant memorized it. Then he left that motel room and stood in the parking lot with afternoon sun feeling too bright and too cold all at once. His phone rang. Marcus. Hey, Grant answered. What's up? Just checking you're still on for tomorrow's flight. Chicago's expecting you Monday morning. Yeah, I'll be there. You okay? You sound off. Grant watched traffic stream past on the BQE. All those people going somewhere. All those lives that made sense. I'm fine, he lied. Just tying up loose ends. We'll tie them quick. Fresh start waiting. Don't fuck it up. I won't. After Marcus hung up, Grant stood in that parking lot for another 10 minutes. Then he went back to his apartment and waited for Volkov's email. It arrived at 6 p.m. 3 gigabytes of documents, photos, financial records, and testimony. Grant spent the entire night reviewing it. The more he read, the colder he felt. Either Dmitry Volkov was the most elaborate liar Grant had ever encountered, or Lucien Draov was exactly as dangerous as everyone feared. At 3 a.m., Grant called the one person who might help him understand what he was looking at, Patricia Chen, his lawyer. She answered on the 5th ring. This better be an emergency. I need you to look at something, financial documents. I need to know if they're real. Grant, I'm not a forensic accountant, and it's 3 in the Please, his voice cracked. I need to know if I helped a monster. Silence. Then, send them. I'll look in the morning. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If these documents are real and connect to anything illegal, I'm obligated to report them. Understand? I understand. Grant sent her everything. Then he sat at his kitchen table and watched dawn break over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of gray and orange that looked like warning. Patricia called at 9 a.m. Where did you get these? No greeting, her voice sharp and frightened. Are they real? Some of them. The bank records check out. The shell corporations exist, the money trails. She exhaled slowly. Grant, if even half of this is accurate, Lucien Draov is laundering hundreds of millions through legitimate businesses, including the foundation. Grant's stomach dropped. The foundation? It's brilliant, actually. Charitable donations are perfect for washing money. You bring in dirty cash, filter it through grants and programs, pay yourself consulting fees and administrative costs, all legal on paper. By the time money comes out the other side, it's clean. But the foundation actually helps people. The shelters are real. The programs can be real and be a front. That's what makes it genius. Patricia's voice hardened. Grant, you need to take this to the FBI. Today. These documents show active money laundering, possible RICO violations, connections to organized crime, and what happens to Selene? What? My ex-wife runs that foundation. If this goes public, if federal charges come down, what happens to her? Silence stretched. Honestly, Patricia said finally. Best case, she's a cooperating witness who claims ignorance. Worst case, she's charged as an accomplice. Either way, her life is over. Career destroyed. Foundation collapsed. Every woman those shelters help, gone. Grant put his head in his hands. But that's not your problem, Patricia continued. Your problem is that you have evidence of federal crimes, and you're legally obligated to report it. If you don't, you're an accessory. What if the evidence is fake? Doctored? Then where did it come from? Who compiled it? Why would someone fabricate hundreds of documents just to... She stopped. Grant, who gave you this? Doesn't matter. It matters if they're trying to manipulate you. If this is some kind of revenge plot or setup, it's not. How do you know? Because Volkov looked like a man with nothing left to lose, Grant thought. Because his story matched too many pieces Grant had already seen. Because Lucien's threats in that warehouse felt exactly like something a man with this much to hide would make. I just do, Grant said. Patricia exhaled. I'm giving you 24 hours. After that, I report this myself. Understand? 24 hours to verify, to decide, to do whatever you need to do. But then it's out of both our hands. Patricia, 24 hours. She hung up. Grant sat motionless at his table. His flight to Chicago left in 6 hours. In his email, Volkov's files sat like unexploded bombs. On his phone, Selene's number stared back at him from the contacts he'd never deleted. He could get on that plane, delete everything, start his new life pretending he'd never seen proof that the man his ex-wife married was exactly the monster everyone whispered about. Or he could burn it all down. Destroy the foundation trying to help vulnerable women because it was funded with blood money. Destroy Selene's new life because it was built on a lie. Destroy Lucien Draov because that's what the evidence demanded. Grant's hands shook as he opened a new email. Typed Selene's address. Attached Volkov's files. Wrote one sentence. I'm sorry. His finger hovered over send. Outside his window, Brooklyn moved through its morning routines, coffee shops opening, people rushing to work, lives that made sense. Grant closed his eyes, thought about Celine's face last night. Tired but free, complicated but seen. Thought about 200 women in foundation shelters who'd have nowhere to go if this exploded. Thought about Lucien's cold promise, I just need to make a phone call. Thought about the man Grant had been 6 months ago, selfish, blind, destructive, and the man he was trying to become. Someone who showed up, who did the work, who made hard choices when they mattered. Grant opened his eyes, deleted Celine's email address, typed a new one instead. The FBI's financial crimes tip line attached every file Volkov had sent, wrote, evidence of money laundering through Draov Foundation and associated entities. Verify independently. Protect the women the foundation serves. They're innocent in this. His finger hovered over send again, this time for different reasons. Sending this would destroy Selene. Not sending it would let a criminal empire continue operating under the cover of charity. There was no good choice. Only the choice that let him sleep at night, or the choice that let 200 women sleep safely. Grant thought about what Lucien had said in the warehouse. Selene built that foundation from nothing, poured her soul into it. Watching it crumble is destroying her. Then he thought about what Volkov had said. She is collateral damage, sad but necessary. Both men were right. Both men were wrong. Grant deleted the FBI email, opened a new one, addressed it to Selene, attached one file. Not the complete evidence, just one document, a shell corporation filing that showed money flowing into the foundation from a Cypriot bank account linked to arms trafficking. He wrote, Selene, I don't know if you'll believe this. I don't know if you'll even read this far, but someone gave me evidence about Lucien's businesses, about where foundation money comes from. I'm not sending you everything because I don't trust my own judgment anymore. Maybe this evidence is real. Maybe it's manufactured. But this one document, I verified it independently. It's real. I'm not telling you what to do with it, not trying to control your life or rescue you or play hero. I'm just giving you information and letting you decide. That's what partnership looks like, right? Seeing someone clearly enough to trust them with the truth, even when the truth is ugly. I'm sorry for everything, for not seeing you when it mattered, for making choices that hurt you, for all of it. But I see you now, and I trust you to make the right call. Grant. He hit send before he could change his mind. Then he sat back and waited for his world to explode one final time. Selene called 30 minutes later. Grant answered on the first ring. What is this? Her voice was ice and fire. What are you trying to do? I'm trying to give you the truth. This document, where did you get it? Does it matter? Yes! She was shouting now. Grant had never heard Selene shout. Yes, it fucking matters, because if this is real, if what it implies is real, then everything, my marriage, my foundation, my entire life, is built on a lie. I know. You know? Selene laughed, high and broken. You know? You send me this bomb and then just say, I know? Like that makes it okay? Nothing about this is okay. Where did you get it? She demanded again. Who gave you this? Grant hesitated. Dmitry Volkov. The silence that followed felt like death. Volkov. Selene's voice dropped dangerously low. The discredited source. The man you helped expose as a fraud. That Volkov. Yes. And you believe him? After you spent weeks proving he's a liar? I don't know what I believe anymore. Grant stood, pacing his small apartment. But I had a forensic accountant verify this specific document. It's real, Selene. That shell corporation exists. That money came from where Volkov claims. Whatever else he's lying about, this part is true. Why are you doing this? Her voice cracked. Why can't you just let me be happy? Because I don't think you are happy. I think you're surviving. There's a difference. You don't know anything about my life. I know you said you sometimes wonder if you traded one cage for another. I know you looked exhausted last night. I know the foundation you built might be washing blood money through charity work. Grant stopped pacing. I know you deserve the truth, even when the truth destroys everything. Selene was crying now. Grant heard it in her breathing. What am I supposed to do with this? She whispered. If I confront Lucien, if I ask questions, then you'll know, one way or another. And if I don't like the answer, then you make a choice. The same choice you made when you divorced me. You decide what you can live with and what you can't. More silence. Then, I hate you for this. I know. You've destroyed my peace twice now. First by being blind, now by making me see too clearly. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing, she was shouting again. Stop being sorry and just leave me alone. Get on your plane to Chicago and disappear and let me handle my own life. Okay? Okay? She sounded surprised. Okay. This is all the help I can give. The rest is yours. Grant sat back down. For what it's worth, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that document is the only questionable thing in Lucien's empire. I hope you stay happy and safe, and the Foundation keeps helping women for decades. But you don't believe that. No, Grant admitted. I don't. Selene was quiet for a long time, then, my flight leaves in 4 hours. Where are you going? Away. Foundation board meeting in Miami. 3 days of planning and fundraising and pretending everything's fine. She exhaled slowly. When I get back, I'll look into this, quietly, carefully. And if I find anything that confirms what you're suggesting, she didn't finish, didn't need to. Be careful, Grant said. Always am. A pause. Grant? Yeah? Thank you for trusting me with this instead of just burning everything down. You're welcome. She hung up. Grant sat in his apartment with winter light streaming through the windows and the terrible knowledge that he'd just set something in motion he couldn't control. In 6 hours, he'd be on a plane to Chicago. In 3 days, Selene would be back in New York with questions Lucien Draov might kill to keep unanswered. And somewhere in that bombed-out motel in Queens, Dmitry Volkov was either dying or already dead, his truth scattered to whoever was desperate enough to believe it. Grant packed the last of his belongings with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. His phone buzzed one final time, text from unknown number. Probably Volkov. He opened it. She has 3 days. After that, evidence goes public regardless. Clock is ticking. Grant stared at the message, felt his blood run cold. Because that wasn't Volkov's writing style. Too clean, too controlled. Someone else had Volkov's evidence. Someone with their own timeline. Someone who wanted Selene to have just enough warning to make a choice before the hammer fell. Grant called the number back. It went straight to a disconnected message. He tried Volkov's original number. Same thing, both numbers dead. Grant stood in his apartment surrounded by boxes and the wreckage of every choice he'd made in the last 6 months, and understood with horrible certainty that he'd been played. Not by Volkov. By someone using Volkov as a weapon. Someone who wanted the truth to come out but needed Grant to deliver it in a way that looked authentic. Someone who'd been watching this entire time, waiting for the right moment to detonate the bomb Grant had been carrying without realizing it. His phone rang. Unknown number. Grant answered with his heart in his throat. Hello? Mr. Mercer. A woman's voice, professional, cold. My name is Agent Sarah Vance, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We received an anonymous tip containing evidence of money laundering operations connected to the Draov Foundation. The IP address traces back to this phone number. Grant's world tilted. I never sent. We need you to come in for questioning, today, before your flight to Chicago. She paused. Or we can make this much more difficult. Your choice. The line went dead. Grant stood frozen. Someone had sent that evidence to the FBI using his email. Someone had framed him as the whistleblower. Someone wanted him trapped in New York when everything exploded. And Grant knew, with the sick certainty of a man finally seeing the whole chessboard, exactly who that someone was. He grabbed his phone, called Selene. It went to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail, third time. A man answered. Lucien. She's busy, he said calmly. On her way to Miami, phone off. Unreachable. Lucien, listen. No, you listen. That familiar soft menace. You made a choice. You gave her information. Now she has to process it. Think about it. Decide what kind of person she wants to be. This isn't about. It's about exactly what it's always been about. Control. You couldn't control her when she was yours. Can't control her now that she's mine. So you're trying to destroy what you couldn't possess. That's not. Goodbye, Grant. Enjoy your conversation with Agent Vance. I'm sure it will be illuminating. Click. Grant stood in his apartment with his flight leaving in 4 hours and FBI agents waiting to question him about evidence he didn't send but couldn't prove he didn't send. He tried to give Selene truth. Instead, he'd handed Lucien the perfect weapon. And now, trapped in a city that had already chewed him up and spit him out, Grant faced a choice with no good answer. Run to Chicago and look guilty. Stay and drown in an investigation that would destroy what little credibility he had left. Or find Selene before Lucien had time to control the narrative, to explain away the evidence, to wrap her even tighter in whatever cage Grant had been trying to spring open. Outside his window, New York glittered in afternoon sun, beautiful and merciless and waiting to see which version of Grant Mercer survived. The old one who ran, or the new one who stayed and fought, even when fighting meant losing everything that mattered. Grant looked at his packed bags, at his phone with Agent Vance's number glowing on the screen, at the clock counting down the hours until his flight. Then he made the only choice he could live with. He grabbed his coat and ran. Grant ran. Not toward the airport, not toward safety or Chicago or the fresh start that had seemed so certain just hours ago. He ran toward the only thing that mattered anymore. The cab dropped him at JFK's Delta terminal 40 minutes later. He burst through the sliding doors into chaos. Holiday travelers, screaming children, the smell of coffee and jet fuel in desperation. Selene's flight to Miami. He'd seen it on her calendar months ago when they were still married and he'd still pretended to pay attention. Delta 1847 departed at 3:15. Grant checked his watch. 2:50. He had 25 minutes. Security took 18 of them. The TSA agent studied Grant's license with suspicious eyes. You checking bags? No bags. Just need to catch a flight. Which flight? Grant's mind raced. He couldn't say Selene's flight, couldn't admit he was chasing someone. Chicago, United, 4:30 departure. The agent waved him through. Grant grabbed his shoes and belt and sprinted toward the Delta gates, weaving through travelers with the wild desperation of a man who'd already lost everything and couldn't afford to lose more. Gate B-17, 2 minutes to boarding. He saw her immediately. Selene stood near the window overlooking the tarmac, phone pressed to her ear, her face carved from stone and exhaustion. She wore a navy suit, carried a leather briefcase, looked every inch the professional philanthropist heading to a board meeting. But Grant saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her free hand gripped the briefcase handle like an anchor. She was terrified. He started toward her, then stopped. Because Lucien Draov stood 10 feet away, partially hidden behind a support column, watching Selene with the focused intensity of a predator studying prey. He hadn't gone to Miami. He'd stayed to watch her board, to make sure she left New York before Grant could interfere. Grant's heart hammered against his ribs. Lucien's eyes shifted, found Grant in the crowd. Neither man moved, just stared at each other across 30 feet of airport terminal while travelers flowed around them like water around stones. Lucien smiled, cold, knowing. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, hit send. Across the terminal, Selene's phone buzzed. She lowered it from her ear, read the message. Her entire body went rigid. She turned slowly, scanned the crowd, saw Grant. The expression that crossed her face, shock, betrayal, exhausted fury, hit Grant like a physical blow. She looked at Lucy and back to Grant. Understanding crystallized in her eyes. Final boarding call for Delta Flight 1847 to Miami, the gate agent announced. All remaining passengers please board immediately. Selene didn't move. Grant took one step forward. Lucien shifted position, casual, blocking the path between them. Don't, Lucien said quietly. Just that one word, but it carried the weight of every threat he'd ever made. I need to talk to her, Grant said. She knows everything she needs to know. No, she doesn't. Grant's hands clenched. She doesn't know you've been controlling this entire situation, that you knew about Volkov's evidence before I did, that you probably helped manufacture half of it just to trap me into... Into what? Lucien's voice stayed soft, deadly. Into giving my wife information? Into making her question our marriage? Into destroying the only stability she's found in years? He stepped closer. You did that, Grant. Not me. I just let you. Final call for Miami. This flight is now closing. Selene stood frozen at the gate. Passengers streamed past her. The agent gestured urgently. She looked at Grant, then at Lucien. "Selene!" Grant shouted across the terminal. Heads turned. Security glanced their direction. She flinched, but didn't move. "Tell her," Grant said to Lucien. "Tell her the truth about where your money comes from, about what the foundation really is." "I already did." Lucien's expression never changed. "Last night, after you sent her that document, we had a very long conversation about my business operations, about the complexities of international finance, about how money isn't clean or dirty, it's just money, and what matters is what you do with it." Grant felt his stomach drop. She knows enough. Lucien glanced at Selene, and she chose to trust me anyway. Because unlike you, I don't lie to her about who I am. She knows exactly what kind of man she married. Then why is she terrified right now? Something flickered behind Lucien's eyes. She's not terrified of me. She's terrified of you both, a new voice said. Grant and Lucien turned simultaneously. Agent Sarah Vance stood 5 feet away, badge visible on her hip, 2 other agents flanking her. "Mr. Draov? Mr. Mercer?" She nodded to each of them. "Interesting place for a reunion?" Grant's mouth went dry. Lucien's expression remained perfectly neutral. "Agent Vance, what brings the FBI to Delta terminals?" "A tip." Her eyes moved between them. "Anonymous. Suggested we might find something interesting if we followed Grant Mercer today. And look, 2 birds, 1 airport." Across the terminal, Selene had backed away from the gate, watching, calculating. "I'm happy to speak with you," Lucien said smoothly, "but perhaps somewhere less public? My lawyers can meet us downtown in an hour." "That won't be necessary." Vance pulled out her phone, showed them the screen. "We just need you to explain these wire transfers. $100,000 from a Draov Foundation account to an offshore entity in Grand Cayman, dated 3 days ago, right after Grant Mercer contacted his ex-wife with alleged evidence of money laundering." Lucien's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. "Foundation makes dozens of transfers weekly," he said. "Grants, operating expenses, all documented and legal. To the Cayman Islands? We have international programs. Name one." Silence stretched. Vance smiled without warmth. "You can't. Because this specific transfer went to a shell corporation registered under a name that keeps appearing in our investigation. The same name Dmitry Volkov gave testimony about before his testimony was mysteriously discredited." She turned to Grant. "Funny thing about that, the evidence that destroyed Volkov's credibility came from you. But forensic analysis suggests some of those documents were created on a computer registered to one of Drakov's security contractors." Grant felt the ground shift beneath him. "You set me up," he said to Lucien, "from the beginning. Volkov. The warehouse meeting, all of it. You fed me evidence to discredit him so Selene would trust you when the real investigation started." "Prove it," Lucien said calmly. "We will." Vance gestured to her agents. "Lucien Draov, you're not under arrest. Yet. But we'd like you to come downtown for questioning. Voluntary, of course. But refusal would be unfortunate for your foundation's pending tax-exempt status." Lucien's jaw tightened fractionally. "I need to make a phone call. After we talk." For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Then Lucien turned to look at Selene across the terminal. She stood perfectly still, face unreadable. He mouthed 3 words. "Trust me. Please." Selene's eyes filled with something Grant couldn't read. Pain, betrayal, love, fear, all of it tangled together. She shook her head slowly. Lucien's entire body went rigid. "Mrs. Draov," Vance called across the terminal. "We'll need to speak with you as well. Foundation director. You'd have oversight of these transfers." Selene walked toward them, each step measured, deliberate. When she reached Grant, she stopped, looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "You did this," she said quietly. "Not an accusation, just a fact. I tried to give you truth. You gave me chaos." Her voice shook. "I asked you to let me handle my own life, and you couldn't do it. Even after everything, even after Chicago, you had to save me one more time. Selene, I loved you once." She said it like admitting to a crime. Not at the end, but at the beginning. I loved who I thought you were. The successful, confident man who saw something in me worth keeping. Grant's throat felt tight. But you never saw me at all. You saw a mirror. Someone to reflect back the version of yourself you wanted to believe in. She glanced at Lucien. And he saw someone to possess, someone to control, someone who made him feel powerful by choosing him. She looked back at Grant. Neither of you ever just saw Selene, the real person, flawed and complicated and strong enough to make her own choices, even the wrong ones. Ma'am, Vance interrupted, we really need to... I know. Selene turned to face the agent. I'll cooperate fully, answer any questions, provide any documentation you need, but first I need to say something. Vance nodded. Selene took a breath. Let it out slowly. The Foundation laundered money. She said it clearly, loudly. Travelers nearby stopped to listen. I didn't know at first, but I suspected. And when I found proof, she pulled a flash drive from her briefcase, held it up. I documented everything instead of reporting it, because I told myself the good we were doing outweighed the bad. Grant stared at her, speechless. Lucien's face had gone pale. 200 women in our shelters, Selene continued. Thousands more helped over the last year. I told myself their lives mattered more than clean money, that the ends justified the means. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. I was wrong, and I'm turning over every document I have, bank records, wire transfers, communications between Lucien A. and his offshore accounts, all of it. She handed the flash drive to Agent Vance. But I want immunity. Selene's jaw set. For myself and for the Foundation. I'll testify. I'll cooperate. But those women in the shelters, they stay protected. New management, clean funding, whatever it takes, because they didn't do anything wrong except need help. Vance studied her for a long moment. That's not my call, she said finally, but I'll recommend it to the U.S. attorney. That's all I can ask. Lucien moved so fast Grant barely saw it. He grabbed Selene's arm. Not rough, but firm. What are you doing? His voice was low, urgent. We had a plan. We were going to fight this together. You said you trusted. I lied. Selene pulled free. Same way you lied about the offshore accounts, about where the money came from, about how many people you've hurt building your empire. I never hurt you. You made me an accomplice. Her eyes blazed. You made me love you while using my Foundation to wash blood money. You made me complicit in things that would destroy me just to keep me tied to you. That's not... Yes, it is. Selene's voice cracked. You're brilliant and dangerous, and you saw me in ways Grant never did. But seeing someone doesn't mean loving them. Sometimes it just means knowing exactly how to trap them. Lucien stared at her, something crumbling behind his eyes. I would have given you everything, he said quietly. You gave me a beautiful cage. That's not the same thing. Vance stepped between them. Mr. Draov, let's go. For a moment, Grant thought Lucien might fight, might call in security contractors or make threats or do something violent and desperate. Instead, he looked at Grant with eyes full of cold fury. You won, Lucien said. Ian said, Congratulations, you destroyed us both. Then he walked away between the FBI agents, spine straight, jaw set, every inch the powerful man except for the handcuffs they slipped on once they were out of public view. Grant and Selene stood alone in the terminal while travelers flowed around them like they were stones in a river. You knew, Grant said finally, about the money laundering. You knew before I sent you anything. I suspected. Selene wouldn't look at him. Found inconsistencies in the books 6 months ago. Transfers that didn't make sense. But I was afraid to look too closely. Afraid of what I'd find. Why didn't you report it? Because I was weak. She finally met his eyes. Because I'd just left you and rebuilt my entire life, and the thought of tearing it down again, of admitting I'd made another mistake, trusted another wrong man, I couldn't do it. So you stayed. I stayed. And I told myself the Foundation's work mattered more than my guilt. That helping women escape abuse was worth looking the other way at where the money came from. Her voice broke. I was wrong. And now hundreds of women might lose their safe houses because I was too much of a coward to do the right thing when it mattered. Grant wanted to comfort her, wanted to say something that would make this better. But there was nothing to say. They'd both made choices. Both destroyed things. Both learned too late what really mattered. What happens now? He asked. Now I hire the best lawyer I can afford. Cooperate fully. Pray the U.S. attorney sees me as a witness instead of a co-conspirator. Selene laughed bitterly. And I spend the next few years rebuilding a foundation that might not survive the scandal. Again. You'll survive. You always do. Will I? She looked at him with exhausted eyes. I'm tired, Grant. Tired of fighting, tired of rebuilding, tired of trusting men who see me as something to own or save or control instead of just a person, a flawed, complicated person who makes mistakes and needs help sometimes, but doesn't need rescuing. I wasn't trying to rescue you. Yes, you were. Even at the end, sending me that evidence, you were trying to save me from Lucien. Same way Lucien was trying to save me from my own guilt by making the foundation legitimate enough that the dirty money didn't matter. She stepped closer, close enough that Grant could see the tears building in her eyes. Here's what neither of you understood. I didn't need saving. I needed someone to stand beside me while I saved myself. Someone to hold my hand while I made the hard choice. Someone to love me enough to let me fail. The words hit Grant like bullets. I'm sorry, he said, for all of it. For not seeing you when you were mine. For not trusting you to handle your own life after you left. Stop. Selene's hand pressed against his chest. Stop apologizing. It doesn't change anything. You're still the man who ignored me for 3 years. I'm still the woman who married a criminal to escape you. Lucien's still the monster who saw my vulnerability and weaponized it. None of that changes just because everyone's sorry now. So what changes? We do. Slowly. Painfully. By making different choices until the person we see in the mirror doesn't make us sick anymore. She dropped her hand. You're going to Chicago. I was, before all this. Go. Take the job. Build something that isn't soaked in regret and ego and all the ugly things we do to each other when we don't know how to love right. What about you? I'm going to war. Selene straightened her jacket. I'm going to fight for that foundation with everything I have. I'm going to testify against Lucien. I'm going to burn down everything I built with him and see what's left when the smoke clears. You'll win. Maybe. Or maybe I'll lose everything and have to start over from nothing. Again. She smiled sadly. But at least this time I'll lose on my own terms. Not because some man decided my fate for me. Grant wanted to hug her, wanted to promise they'd stay in touch, wanted something that felt like closure. But Selene was already walking away. Selene. She stopped, didn't turn. You were always the strongest person I knew. I just never looked close enough to see it. I know, she said quietly. That was always the problem. Then she walked toward the FBI agents waiting near the security checkpoint, spine straight and shoulders back, looking like someone walking into battle instead of destruction. Grant watched her go until she disappeared around a corner. Then he stood alone in the terminal with afternoon light streaming through the windows and the hollow knowledge that he'd just watched the last piece of his old life walk away forever. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Flight leaves in 90 minutes. You making it? Grant looked at the departure boards. United to Chicago, gate C24. Still boarding. He could make it, barely. Could leave New York and everything it represented behind. Could start over the way Selene suggested, building something that wasn't soaked in regret. Or he could stay. Face Agent Vance's questions. Get pulled into the investigation as a witness or accomplice or whatever they decided he was. Could watch from the front row as everything exploded. Grant closed his eyes. Thought about who he'd been 6 months ago. Arrogant, blind, cruel in ways he'd never acknowledged. Thought about who he was now, humbled, broke, alone. Better, maybe, but still broken. He opened his eyes, typed back to Marcus. I'll be there.